Llew Obrien, welcome to Over the Bonnet.
It's great to be here, Mark. Good to see you. We haven't caught up for quite a while, so it's always good to come out to the ranch and say g'day.
It has been a while. Now, we'll go back to the start of your parliamentary career first up. What got you into politics?
Well, politics was something I've been passionate about for a long time. I've always been passionate about politics my whole adult life. But it was probably in the early to mid 2000s that I started to become quite active and joined a political party because of the job that I was doing, which was road safety, accident investigation, and I just felt that being involved was a way to facilitate positive change when it came to our road transport system and making it safer. So I joined the National Party back then and was very enthusiastic about it, and it's something I enjoyed, something that I'd encourage others to do as well. And then eventually my predecessor and friend and mentor, Warren Truss, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, had made the decision that he was going to retire, and he approached me and said, "Llew, I think you'd be a good replacement for him." And I had to give it some serious thought because it is a big decision going into public life. And after talking with my wife Sharon and my family and Warren and particularly Warren's wife Lynn Truss, who's a great friend of mine, I decided to give it a go and run for pre-selection.
Must have been a big thing, though, having the blessing of the sitting member and the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, it was. It was. I've never seen myself as somebody that should be held out in public life as some, I suppose I always looked at Warren as being something special.
He was an enigma.
He was a man of great conviction and across the detail of policy, and obviously he went as high as you can go in the National Party in terms of parliamentary service. So I always saw Warren as something great, and when he asked me to replace him, I had to give it some thought because I wondered whether I was that guy. I see myself as very much an everyday normal bloke.
Are you that guy?
I mean, that's for others to judge. I've done some things in Parliament that have made me stand out, and I've been re-elected by the people of Wide Bay, so they obviously liked what I was doing. But at the end of the day, it's not for me to judge whether I'm that guy. It's for the people of Wide Bay who I serve.
Surely, though, I understand that it is, and you have been elected, but what sort of a job do you think you're doing? Give yourself a report card.
I suppose I'm certainly standing up for what I believe in. No one can accuse me of hiding away and not taking on difficult issues, and I really do believe and feel that I'm in Parliament to serve the people of Wide Bay and Australia. I'm not there for personal ambition.
Are too many people like that they are in there for their own? A lot of people say that politicians are trying to feather their own nest. Mm-hmm. Do you find that?
Absolutely, but you'll never go into a workplace where there's more ambition than there is in Parliament. It is chock full of people who all believe they should be and can be the Prime Minister, and that's not going to be the case for a lot of them. I've never seen myself like that. All I've seen myself is an absolute champion for people from
Well, we know you're an absolute champion, but can you be Deputy Prime Minister? Is that on the radar?
It's not something that I look. I don't strive to be the Deputy Prime Minister, but if in the course of me doing what I do, people made that decision and decided that I was somebody like Warren did for me when he retired, if someone thought that I was that person, well, of course I would look at it, but it's absolutely not something I I have on my list of things to do while I'm serving the people of Wide Bay in Parliament.
Especially with Warren being the Deputy Prime Minister, it's a great platform for you to aspire to that sort of office. It must be that sort of ambition that drives you, though, in some ways.
Anyone can see that it's a great honour to be in a position in public service where the Australian people believe that you should be there as the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister, or whatever the case may be. But you never underestimate the immense satisfaction of helping an individual or helping many individuals, and you can do that in the way that I've done it, as on the back bench, whether it be when I brought about the Royal Commission into the banks and financial services sector.
You were a thorn in the side of Malcolm Turnbull.
Well, every good politician or every good parliamentarian really should be a thorn in the side of their leader. If they're not, they need to think about why they're there. And it is quite a competitive place. But I've always identified what the goal is, and that's helping people, and then I've gone after it. And that's why I don't expect to be the Deputy Prime Minister, or I don't expect to be a senior cabinet minister, because I do things in a way that I get the job done, but potentially those opportunities won't come my way. They could, but we'll see. But I'm not going to change from what I do, and that's what I think is right and what I think is fundamentally best for Wide Bay.
You've been in for a few years, 4 or 5 years now. What's the biggest single achievement that you think you've gotten across the line since you've been in the chair?
Well, there's been a few big events. So as I said before, I was instrumental in bringing on a Royal Commission into the financial services sector and the banks. That was a big call and a big move, and there were, whilst not for a minute do I think the outcomes of that are perfect, but they certainly gave the banks and the big end of the financial services sector a wake-up call that there were people in Parliament who would pull them on and cause something like that Royal Commission, and that's what they always need to think.
Why do you think Malcolm Turnbull didn't want it?
You'd have to ask Malcolm Turnbull that. But the banks were putting profits before people. There is absolutely no doubt about that, and that was on full display in the Royal Commission. So that would be one of the big things that I would identify. The other one is one that's very close to my heart, and that is upgrading the Bruce Highway around Gympie. So when I managed to achieve funding for Section D of the Karoi to Curra bypass, that's $1 billion. And it was something that a lot of people said wasn't going to come our way in the time frame that.
Well, they were saying 20 years.
They were saying 20 years, and they were saying in Canberra that this is where people say you're on the backbench, you'll shut up and be seen and not heard. And
do they say that? Do they actually? Do you have to toe the party line?
Well, I think I've proved not. But there is, without telling you to shut up, obviously they don't say shut up and be seen and not heard, but there are ways and means of certainly doing that. And I just refuse to be quiet on an issue that first and foremost is about safety and families and lives on our roads. And that is obviously to benefit the people of my region, the region that's voted me in to go down there and do a job for them.
That's a biggie though, this one with the Section D of the bypass. When is it expected to be up and running and operational? So
we're looking around 2024. We had the sod turning recently at the commencement of it. And so it's commenced, it's going, and it'll be about 4 to 5 years now. They've got to factor in potential unforeseen delays. Everything going smoothly, we should be seeing that open in 2024, which will be great for Gympie. It'll be great for road safety.
I think that's the biggest thing, is road safety for people travelling north.
Yeah, definitely. I live on the Bruce Highway north of Gympie, and over this Christmas period, there's been days where I've heard in excess of 5 to 10 emergency vehicles going past with their sirens on, and they're going to accidents.
Mary and I were held up for 2 hours at an MVA Canalda Way.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, there was a truck that went off the road up at Canalda. So, we need to keep pushing, and that's another point. We need to keep pushing the 4 lanes north. We need world-class 4-lane divided highway across the east coast of Australia. You see, Victoria and New South Wales have that, or it's on the absolute verge of completion. I think it might have been completed now and opened in New South Wales. They have 4 lanes. We have 4 lanes going from Melbourne to Gympie. And that's where it stops. Now, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. And we've got another section of highway at Tyro that's going to be built, and it's in the design phase as we speak. Now, that's another thing that I've ruffled a few feathers on, because Do
you enjoy doing that with these guys, the politicians that think that they're politicians for their own gain? Do you enjoy ruffling the feathers?
I don't enjoy it. I do it because I'd much prefer not to. I'd much prefer not to have to go to the mattresses on these sorts of things. But when you see something that's fundamentally wrong, like the Tyro bypass, they're building 9 kilometres of brand new greenfield highway, about 40 k's north of where the 4 lanes end, and they're building 2 lanes. Why would you do that? I'm told there's in excess of 10,000 vehicle movements a day. We know that all that it'll take is a low loader to break down, or someone to have an accident, and not only have you got a safety issue, you've got massive congestion. So why not future-proof it? Why not do what the rest of the east coast of Australia has done?
Are we the poor cousins in Queensland?
Well, when it comes to the national highway, I feel like we're treated that way, but it's the Commonwealth funds 80% of the Bruce Highway, a national highway. This is where a lot of people don't understand, is that the responsibility for the national highway in terms of delivery is the state responsibility. The Commonwealth funds 80% of it, but we can't force the state to upgrade a piece of the Bruce Highway. Of course, paying 80%, we can encourage them to do
that's a big amount of encouragement, though.
It is a big amount of encouragement, but we need to push them harder, because we've got a situation at the moment where this Tyro bypass, the State Minister, Mark Bailey, is refusing to budge on it. I had a discussion with him early in the piece, and when I identified that this would be a death road, that they're going to build, a brand new road that was going to kill people, and to his credit, he gave me a commitment they'd put some sort of barrier up the middle. And I do commend him for that, but it's not enough. It's not enough. There's still a greater risk of traffic trauma. There's a greater risk in any number of different scenarios with 2 lanes, even with a dividing barrier. Head-on collisions aren't the only risk on a road. So I'm pushing hard to make sure that that's 4 lanes. The community wants it. To fund that, I need the agreement, first and foremost, from the state to put a plan forward. But second of all, I need Michael McCormack, the leader of the Nationals, who's the Minister for Regional Development and Transport, to step up and push hard for this. This is regional Australia. Michael McCormack's the leader of a party that champions regional Australia, yet we're getting a second-class road in regional Australia that, by its traffic numbers, by every measure, it should be 4 lanes. Now, going back to, do I enjoy ruffling feathers? No, I don't. But one of the reasons I don't is because it upsets me when people who have been given this huge responsibility and this huge ability to deliver don't deliver when they should, and when it's obvious that they should. And that's when I've got to kick in and say, well, no, I'm going to use this position of being a federal parliamentarian to ensure that I do my absolute best to make it happen.
Are you a maverick politician? Would you describe yourself as the maverick along the Barnaby lines?
Others describe me as a maverick. Others use that term, but and once again, it's for others to judge me on my performance. But I have had a few wins. And I haven't had those wins by doing things necessarily conventionally.
How do you get on with McCormack?
Great. Michael McCormack is one of nature's gentlemen. He's a good guy.
Why didn't you support him in the leadership spill with Barnaby Joice?
Well, I think the main thing there was that I thought we could be doing a better job, and that's why I called the spill. That's a matter for the party room, and it was a matter decided by the party room, and it's a matter that's in the past now.
Do you wish that it was kept in-house?
Yes. I mean, one of the things that when that occurred, I didn't do any media. I was criticised heavily by the media for not doing media, by some elements of the media for not doing media. But
damned if you do and damned if you don't.
But I wanted it to be something that was dealt with by the party room and something that we could move on from regardless of the outcome. It was what it was, but it's in the past now. And I tell you what, we're in a different world now than what we were then. No one had really heard of the coronavirus at that stage. It was early in the year. Well, they had, but not in the terms that we see it now. We didn't have heading towards $1 trillion worth of debt for the nation. So
how are we paying for the road and those sorts of things, those big infrastructure projects that need to happen when so much money is being spent to cover the coronavirus?
Well, look, we were heading towards $500 million worth of debt prior to the coronavirus, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but we're in a lot better position than many other nations that we trade with and we deal with internationally. We have to borrow money. That's the reality, but we have to pay that back. And the only way we can pay that back is to get the economy going and get out of the way of business. Obviously, we've got many challenges with the stage of this pandemic that we're at. We haven't got an effective vaccine yet. Hopefully, it's imminent. So we're seeing spikes, as we are right about now, spikes in New South Wales and Victoria. And until we have a vaccine, that's going to be life with the coronavirus. So we've got to navigate our way through this section of this global pandemic. We've done that to the best of our ability with wage subsidies, which is JobKeeper. We've put billions and billions and billions of dollars into business to keep them alive, some to incubate, and to keep them going by subsidising and keeping those employees connected to employers. So when we come out the other side of this, we can recover as quickly as possible.
Do you see light at the end of the tunnel?
Absolutely. Australia's got some incredible assets. We've got a thriving resources industry that's helping us at the moment. We've got an abundance of land. We've got high quality education and healthcare. Australia has got everything going for it, and we need to support the private sector, get out of the way of the private sector, let them do what they do best, which is growing and innovating, and we need to support them where we can.
Are we over-governed then?
I think we are. I believe that in smaller government, I don't think government should be intruding in everyone's life and intruding in everyone's business. I understand the obvious, which is that, of course, you need strong regulations to help everyone function fairly, but at the same time, they need to be as minimal as possible.
If you were to get out the big stick and draw a line through one aspect of government to reduce the amount of government, what would you do?
I think tax reform, where government is imposing. I'm a believer in that lower taxes stimulates the economy. We've done some work in that regard, some good work. But and I tell the state government to get rid of payroll tax. That there is not a business person I know that just isn't appalled by payroll tax, a penalty for employing people. It was one of the taxes that that should have gone with the GST, and it's a disgrace, really. The payroll tax.
Stamp duty is going in New South Wales.
Well, we'll believe it when we see it with all of these things. But look, reducing tax, giving people incentive to work, giving people incentive to innovate. And, we've done some great things in terms of research and development and tax offsets and immediate depreciation of assets in businesses to stimulate business and get people doing what they want to do. We just need to get out of their way and help them where we can.
Okay, now you're in Parliament. You've had a fairly, in some ways, meteoric rise. Were you in the right place at the right time becoming the Deputy Speaker?
I suppose I was. or I am. I am the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, and it's a position that I didn't... it's a position I didn't look to take on. It wasn't something that I aspired to greatly, but it was something that came up, and I thought it was suitable for me. Spoke to some of my colleagues briefly about it, and they voted for me, and that's where I've ended up. And it's a great honour to work with the current Speaker, Tony Smith, who is acknowledged as one of the real high-level speakers that since Federation began. He's in his third term as the Speaker, and he is a fellow that is a great mentor, someone I get along very well with, someone who I've learnt an incredible amount from, and I see it as a real great honour and privilege to be the Deputy Speaker in a team that's led by him.
What has it taught you about the parliamentary process, being the Deputy Speaker and being involved at that level?
At an individual level, it's I find it, because I'm a very independent thinker. I mean, I'm absolutely about the party that I represent as an LNP member. First and foremost, I always represent the people of Wide Bay first, but I am a member of the LNP, and I sit with the National Party in Parliament. But one of the things that it's shown me, and one of the things that I have to practice, is an absolute unbiased view when I'm sitting in that chair. There is. Do
you sometimes go, nah, sorry, fellas?
Well, I think that I do. And once again, it's one of those things that others will judge. But I can't see. Obviously, there is a division, and you have the government and you have the opposition. Both sides play an absolute integral role in our parliamentary democracy. To sit there and effectively say there isn't a Labor Party and there isn't a Liberal national government, and when I sit in that chair, I'm not a member of that Liberal national government, I suppose it's something definitely that you have to consider all of the time.
How do you get on with your Labor colleagues? Because obviously well enough they've voted for you.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it's absolutely because they think I'm a great guy, but look, this is Australia. We are the luckiest country in the world. Other governments and forms of government and representation in other areas of the world, opposition and government are killing each other. It's not like that in Australia. They're on the other side of the chamber when I do sit with the government. they're Australians on that other side. And when we walk out of that chamber, we're all Australians. And I consider a lot of those people on the other side to be friends of mine, good friends, people I trust. Like the vast majority of the people on my side, sitting in that chair gives you definitely a better appreciation for that when you have to adjudicate as to what's going on in the Parliament.
How did you feel the first time when you sat down? It was Mr. Speaker, and you were in the chair. It must have been a real rush.
Yeah, I was hit with the gravity of the moment, that's for sure. If you look at the election of the Deputy Speaker when I was elected, Tony Smith, the Speaker, makes a comment there of congratulations and you're on duty in half an hour, so you better get ready. Or words to that effect. Sitting in that chair, chairing the Parliament of the nation is an experience that not many people get to do. And my view, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, I've always seen myself as an average bloke. And for an average bloke to be sitting there with the Prime Minister on one side and the Leader of the Opposition on the other, or in the matters of public importance debate with the government on one side and the opposition on the other, chairing that is huge. And I did feel that the first time I sat there, and I feel it every time. I feel that every time I arrive in Canberra for Parliament. I look at that when I'm heading towards work. I'm walking up in the morning from a distance. You can see the flag flying over everything around. When I see those big stainless steel beams going into the sky, I just think, the day I don't feel in awe of this, and the day I don't see the absolute immensity of what's happening here and what I'm involved in, is the day that I need to hang up my shingle. It's the day that I need to get out of politics and give someone else a go.
Are you a career politician?
I hope not. But in saying that, I mean, what is a career politician? I could be in politics potentially for some time, but I don't. I think the term career politician has a connotation of someone who's acting in a way that they want to be there for a long time.
And I think some people are, and I think you can't get away from it.
Yeah, and I'm not. That's not how I judge what I do or what I'm motivated by. I'm motivated by achieving things for the people of Wide Bay and the nation, and getting the job done, and yes, sometimes making the hard decisions that maybe some of my other colleagues aren't prepared to stand up on.
Is it because you were working in the back room for a long time as a member of the LNP and working in certain positions in the LNP that you were used to the procedure?
Oh, look, I don't think so. I would probably say the greatest influence on the way I act and the way I conduct myself and my style of representation is learnt through being a policeman, having to make those decisions on what is right and what is wrong. And you know, if you're genuine about that and you go with your heart, you'll get it right most of the time. And as every police officer that pulls on a uniform every day has to make tough decisions, a lot tougher than what I have to make regularly. And they do it on a sense of right and wrong. Obviously, there's rules and regulations, but you can't go in the heat of the moment for these guys. You can't go pulling out the operational procedures manual. Sometimes you just got to make a call, and they've got a strong sense of right and wrong. And I think that's where I learned a lot of my skills when it comes to advocating and taking on a challenge. I mean, I remember you were helping me with a road safety video when I was the acting officer in charge at Kilkheven, and we were producing this video together about fatalities and how people needed to slow down. And within 20 minutes of doing that,
I remember it well.
Going through the script, we were both at a fatal. You were there and I was there. I'd been called. It was just down the road and it was a fatality. Experiences like that can't help but make you a good decision maker under pressure and a little bit fearless. Not too fearless, hey, if you can do that, as I've said on a number of occasions, if I can, and I say this, and I commend every police officer that's serving an emergency service when I say this, because this is about them. If you can tell somebody that a member of their family is no longer with them, give that dreaded death message, you've experienced the hardest conversation you're ever going to have with anyone. And I can tell those police officers that are doing that every day, you'd tell the Prime Minister that he's going to have a Royal Commission into the banks pretty easy, trust me.
It's an interesting thing because we were out on the road that particular day. You were as the police officer at the scene of the accident and I was journo come television cameraman.
Yeah.
So we were both doing our jobs, but I remember watching and just seeing how it really affected you. And it does tend to affect you. And what are the long-term ramifications of what you've had to endure out of that?
Well, I make it no secret that that I live with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was something that that happened to me quite some years before you and I were there on that day. So I was living with that and managing it when I was a police officer as well. And a lot of police and a lot of people that, whether it's the armed forces or whether it's emergency services domestically, end up seeing things that trigger their mind or become ingrained in their mind, and they can cause conditions like post-traumatic stress. I was a Beyond Blue Bureau speaker before I entered Parliament, so it was always something I was passionate about. One of the things that after my 16 years in the police that I was always felt very, very committed to was letting other police who were going through the experiences that I went through know that, hey, listen, it's okay. You're going to get through this. Don't worry, you're not a failure. I've been there, you know. So that was really important to me before I went into politics.
How did it affect you directly from all of the accidents and the carnage you saw on the roads? How was it affecting you, affecting your family and the people around you? How did you deal with it?
Well, so after a period of really intense traffic accident investigation on the Bruce Highway primarily, for me, the wheels fell off for a period of time back in the 2000s. And it was a hard road back. It was a really hard road back. Like I remember, you see, you do put these things in the back of your mind when they're the signs that you're not coping or the signs that you're starting to fail in a culture like the police.
You've got to be 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
You do. That's the way you've got to see yourself, and anything that threatens that, you don't want to bar off. So you deny it to yourself for quite some time, and this is where what drove me to help others is if you get in early, it's so much easier to recover from these things and to get on with a normal, productive life or to start managing your symptoms.
You say the wheels fell off. How did they fall off for you?
Well, as I said, I was somewhat in denial about things starting to not go so well. My concentration went. I started to have nightmares. I started to not be able to sleep. And I started being triggered by things, whether it be the smell of a hot engine or the taillights of a particular model of car that I'd been involved in a fatality or something like that. They would start to trigger me. I remember one of the first times that I experienced what was a real PTSD moment was I had been to a fatal, and there was a new model car, and it was a long, exhausting investigation at the scene. It was hot, and the day was done. Everything was being completed, and they were pulling the car out of the creek that it was in, and as it came out, I could see its tail lights, and it was a new model for that car. And I didn't think anything of that. And a few months later, I was sitting in the police car on the passenger side of the police car, and that model car was in front. And the person put their brakes on, the lights shone on that, and I went into a complete moment of panic. My brain just had a fight or flight reaction to those tail lights. It rendered me almost completely incapable of doing anything at that moment, and I didn't know what was going on. It took me back to, and I knew what that was about, but I didn't know what was going on in my head. I knew they were the tail lights of that car. So you put those things behind you. You try and you forge on. You want to be a strong symbol for your kids, and a strong a person for your colleagues and for the community. But then eventually, if you keep denying that these things are happening, if you keep denying that, yep, I've got to get to work, it doesn't matter that I didn't sleep last night, or eventually you can't do your job. And that's where I ended up for a period of time. And I was lucky that the Queensland Police Service was so good in helping me back through all of the support that they gave me. I remember there were a lot of police officers that were in my position that were out, but it was my goal to get back. It was my goal to be a fully operational police officer again, and I tried, and it was a bloody tough journey, but I got back, and I did it successfully, and that incident that we referred to before was quite some years after my return, and I was resilient enough. Sure, I had to manage myself, and sure,
we could see
I knew
how
the
it directly affected you, and you could see that. And that must be a tough thing because, as you say, you were desperate to get back to work because that's what you are trained for.
That's right. And, I had young sons and a young daughter, and I always saw myself as being, they'll be proud of their dad as a policeman, and to think that I was broken was hard, and it was something that I had to work really, really hard. But it's turned out to be one of the good things in my life, because I now know a lot more about Llew Obrien. I wonder if I would be the Deputy Speaker or a Member of Parliament if I hadn't had those experiences, to be honest with you.
How's it improved you?
Well, I just have a much better understanding of my limits. And my limits are pretty high. I still have to be mindful of triggers to do with my PTSD, which are very specifically around traffic accidents, sirens, certain things. And I've got old friends, retired policemen that have lived the same life that I do. Fully, perfectly functioning older people, but they still, if they see or hear something that just triggers one of those memories, they've just got to be careful. And I'm like that, but in doing so, it gave me a great understanding of how much I can take. And I do look back on those times, and I think, well, a lot of things that I go through now in politics are nothing compared to what I've overcome.
Puts it into perspective.
Yeah, what I've overcome there. It's not something I look at as bad, and if I can tell that to other people who are going through it now, and say, listen, because there was a point where in my life where I didn't think I was going to be much good. That was a realistic possible outcome of where I was at.
Did you realise that at the time?
I wondered whether I would ever be able to come good, and whether didn't matter how much exercise, treatment, whatever. I just wanted to look, am I never going to be able to work again? Am I never going to be able to contribute again? And I'd want to, and one of the great things about this opportunity that I have now, where people can look at me and say, well, this guy's kicking a few goals, I can say to those people who are in the depths of those moments now, it's okay. You can fight your way through this. It's hard yakka, but trust me, there is light on the other side of this, and you can come out the other side of this a different person. You're never going to be that same person again.
Is that better?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. I'm stronger now than I was before that happened to me.
Do you find some people look down on you because of what you've gone through, or is it pretty positive
Yeah,
across
look,
the board?
I know that some people have criticised me for speaking openly about it in politics. Speaking openly about PTSD and mental health. Some people have criticised me and said you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't.
Really?
Yeah, that still occurs, but I do it knowing full well who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing, and if I can help, and I did a piece in the Courier Mail at the beginning of the year or mid-year, outlining a lot of my journey, and the overwhelming response was thank you for doing that, because this is what we've got to do to reduce the stigma associated with mental ill health. So there, for that one or two people who will criticise me and say you're showing yourself to be weak, or you shouldn't be doing that because they don't affect me.
Are they just showing themselves to be weak?
Well, that's for others to judge if they say it, but I've got a very different view, and I see part of my work. You said before, what are the achievements? And I talked about the road and the Royal Commission into the banks. I see breaking down the stigma associated with mental ill health as absolutely one of the biggest things that I can do. You have a position like that I have, and you're the sort of bloke that I am, I can't not take that opportunity to say, listen, it's not, the stigma associated with mental ill health is unjustified, because there are so many great treatments out there, and you can get in early, and you can live a very, very good life. You can live a better life. Not to take that opportunity would just be an absolute failure in my eyes of myself.
How did you feel making your maiden speech to Parliament when you were able to talk about these sorts of things?
It was okay. It's part of the journey. It's an incredible honour. I've made some big speeches. I've addressed the United Nations General Assembly regarding road safety. You make these in public life. You do these things, and they're very meaningful. And but once again, they're an opportunity. Well, your maiden speech is an opportunity to outline what you're about. I spoke about jobs in Wide Bay. I spoke about aged care. I spoke about dollar milk. I spoke about a lot of the things that I've been absolutely a part of improving. So that's your opportunity to say, this is what I want to do. And now after 5 years, I can go back and say, well, if there was any doubt that this is what I was trying for, go to that first speech. That's what I was about, and that's what I was having a crack at. But your first speech is a momentous moment. It is your first speech. The first time you walk into that chamber in there is an incredible moment. You walk in there and you've seen it on TV, and you know what's happened in there. Some of the big events and decisions in Australia. Like I say, there's something wrong with you if you walked in there and you didn't feel in awe.
You've walked out of the LNP once. You're back in the fold again.
the National Party, the Parliamentary
Well,
National Party.
You walked out of the room
Yeah.
as such, and hence you fell into the Speaker's role. What did Damien Drum say to you, the guy that was supposed to be the Speaker at the time, when you fell into the role? What was his reaction?
Well, Damien and I get along fine. Damien's a good representative for the seat of Nichols in Victoria, a very different seat to Wide Bay, and he's a guy with a lot of experience. I obviously had a view that I should be the Deputy Speaker and not him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put myself forward. But that's politics. I was elected by the people. There cannot be any clearer way of being the Deputy Speaker. The Parliament voted, and I was elected with the support of quite a few of my National Party government colleagues as the Deputy Speaker. Damien is the Chief Government Whip. He's a guy, now that I'm back in the National Party, I've had a couple of chats to, and look, he's a big boy.
Are you going to be stirring the nest, as it were, and with any other leadership spills, or are you happy to support Michael McCormack?
Well, Michael's the leader. I made it clear in the media that I'm not going back to destabilise or to do the numbers or anything like that. The world has changed since the 10th of February 2020 greatly, and we've got some big issues that we need to tackle, I think.
What's the biggest issue then on your plate at the moment that you think we need to do?
Getting the economy, being in a position to bounce back from this global pandemic economically is the biggest thing for everyone, because it filters into everything, whether it be healthcare, whether it be building better roads. It filters into everything. If we can't pay our bills, well, we can't build Section D of the Bruce Highway. If we can't pay our bills as a nation, we can't pay for healthcare. It's getting our economy going so the government can run properly should be the biggest priority for every Australian.
Are you a policeman sitting in Parliament still? Do you still have that policeman mentality as such when you're in there, because you've still got to make decisions as you were when you're on the beat?
I think we all take our previous experiences in life into everything that we do from that time on. There's lawyers in there that will look at certain issues through the lens of a lawyer, and there's nurses, and there's policemen, and public servants, and lobbyists, and political staffers. They're all there that bring their life experiences. So in that context, yeah, absolutely, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what I've done and where I've come from. I think I'm respected within the Parliament because of the person that I am, and that person has certainly come about as a result of being a policeman.
Why policing in the first place? What got you into it when you're, say, going through high school? What were your career choices? What did you want to do?
Well, I had a bit of a rocky start in terms of my entry into adult life. My mum,
don't we all?
Yeah, that's right. So I left school the last year that I actually completed it was year 9. My mum had motor neurone disease, so I left school after that and to nurse mum, and we moved to Queensland when I was 15, and we nursed mum until she passed away at home, and I'm with myself and my father, and when that was over, as you can imagine, it's not easy for anyone nursing.
It's a lot of trauma for a 15-year-old to have to
Yeah, well,
deal with.
at 16, I turned 16 shortly after we got there. But look, my mind was just not in a space to go from spoon feeding and helping to change and nurse a dying parent to jump straight back into school. So my opportunities were limited when that experience was over, and it took me a while to get on my feet, and it was when I was in my 20s that I really thought, and when I started my family and the kids, that I thought, right, I've really got to get a career. And one of the main motivating factors was, what would my kids be proud of? What job would I do that would make my boys at that time proud of me? And that was policing. And I was fit and healthy, and I liked helping people, and I thought it'd be a good fit, and it was. And it was a very positive part of my life. How
close are you to your father, and were you at the time? It must have been an incredible thing to go through.
Yeah, look, my father's passed away now, we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things like a lot of people, but I focus on my family that I've created, and I'm very close to my family, my kids, my boys and my daughter. I'm and my granddaughter and another granddaughter on the way. I'm the luckiest bloke in the world to have my family, and they're what makes me tick.
Are you a good dad being away so much, or do you wish you were giving them more time?
Well, this is one of the things that I often reflect upon, because when my kids were kids, when they were at home, my focus was about staying home and being a dad.
And they grew up so fast.
Oh,
You saw it? Yeah, I did. And they seemed to, you turn around, they were a foot taller.
Yeah. So I would never have taken on this role when I had an active role. And when I say active, when I had a real hands-on role of being a dad. It was only after they'd left home, really. Eve was still at home. But they were adults, effectively, that I thought, okay, now is a time that I can really do this. And that was a big factor for me making that decision, because if my kids were younger, I think it'd be very, very difficult to be in their lives, although there's plenty that do it successfully, and they've got the advantage of having FaceTime and all of these things, and taking their kids to Canberra, and there's a lot of things those kids will see that my kids at that age were not exposed to, good things. But for me, and Llew Obrien couldn't have done it when I had kids that needed a dad at home, in my view.
How do you deal with the travel? Because it is quite extensive, going down to Parliament and back and forward. How do you deal with the amount of travel you've got to do now, and especially now that you are the Deputy Speaker, it's increased even further?
Yeah, so I've had to attend every sitting of Parliament this year, even when we had very limited sittings, when there were only, I can't remember the exact numbers, but virtually everyone was not there. But we had to get certain legislation. At one stage, we had to go down and sit for one day. So I've attended that and had to attend that to give Tony a hand, Tony Smith, the Speaker, and to fulfil those duties. Where I can, and this is something a little bit unique to me, I ride my motorbike to Canberra. I've got a Triumph 1200 triple, and that's something that I do, that I like to do. It keeps me. It's a good exercise in gathering my thoughts before I get to Parliament. It's a good exercise in unwinding on the way home. But it's also just another good opportunity for me to stop at servos and have a chat to people. And they don't know I'm a federal member of Parliament, and I don't actively go out and tell them that. They're not in Wide Bay, but I just like to canvass them and see what their views of the world are and how we're going. And 99.9% of the time they never know they're talking to the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, but it's good to get an honest appraisal of how the government's doing.
What's the single biggest thing that they do tell you when you're on the road and you talk to people?
Throughout the pandemic, there has been a lot of positivity in terms of how we've handled it. There have been, particularly from business people, even at the service station, the JobKeeper kept them going. Would have certainly, they would never have survived without it. Other responses, our responses as a nation have been good. There's a lot of goodwill out there towards the government, and it's as a result of how we've handled the coronavirus. Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, I get a lot of positive feedback about his response as the Prime Minister, and bringing together the National Cabinet and taking a leadership role in that regard. I couldn't imagine, in terms of of being a parliamentarian or being in public service, there probably wouldn't be too many more difficult or challenging jobs than other than a wartime Prime Minister, than what Scott Morrison's doing at the moment as the Prime Minister through this global pandemic. And I think he's doing a sterling job. I think he's a guy that is a very, very much about serving. He's there and he's focused on the commitment that we gave Australians at the election to give good government in the face of no matter what. I mean, when we went to the election last time, the coronavirus wasn't there, but we gave a commitment to give the best government that we can. And that's what characterises him in my dealings. He is absolutely 100% laser focused on delivering the best government for Australians that we can. So he has my support, absolutely, obviously, but he does genuinely as a Prime Minister.
Does the coronavirus, as you see it, is it a positive or a negative for the government then?
Oh, look, it's just a challenge, a massive challenge. People, it's for the commentators and others to judge whether tough times put the wind in the sails of the government or they don't. And it's for the people to make that decision at an election as to whether we've done a good job. That's who ultimately it is up to. But all we can do is our best. I've got a good relationship with a very good relationship with the Health Minister and the Treasurer and the Prime Minister, and I think they're three blokes, three Australians who have done an outstanding job in the most difficult times in public life.
Does it worry you driving to and from Canberra with the coronavirus sort of hotspots around the place? Does it worry you going down there and going here and travelling the way you have to?
Yeah, look, I'm obviously very mindful of it, and I've had to quarantine upon return once, and I avoid any hotspots, absolutely, and I have to get a permit to get back into have had to in the past to get the permit to get back into Queensland. Like all of us, we have to be diligent and aware of what we do, how we do it, when we do it, and that we're doing the right thing by our fellow citizens and ourselves in terms of the coronavirus. That means checking health websites in New South Wales and Queensland, understanding what's happening, where it's happening, and what your responsibilities are. So an example would be when Sydney was a hot spot and I was in Canberra, I had to go out west on the bike to come in out up along the Newell Highway as opposed to going up the Pacific or at that stage even up towards the New England Highway. So they're minor inconveniences compared to what some other Australians are having to go through at the moment.
Did you find any hostility due to the fact that you were travelling so much?
No. Everyone's been very, very understanding. There's a lot of travel that we do. I probably travel. I'm this year's been an exception because we've all been limited by normally you're involved in committee work which can take you around the country and in different places, but as the Deputy Speaker I don't do that, so I'm actually more available to the people of Wide Bay. The travel's not a big issue and everyone understands. I mean, our Parliament is in Canberra. Once upon a time they used to have to take our horse and coach down there and they'd spend months of the year down there dealing with things and then come back, and it was done in big sittings like that. We're very lucky now that I can take a day or at most 2 days out of my calendar to travel to and from over the course of a year. It's something people understand.
You say about Warren Truss, who you took over from. What has he said about how you've gone so far? Has he given you a report card?
Warren is a bloke who very much understands that I'm a different person to Warren. But he always, on the times that I've asked him for advice, he's always given fearless and frank advice. But then he's always followed it up with, "Well, Lou, you're a different person to me, and you need to do what's right."
So as far as political mentors, who's the person that you aspire to be politically?
Well, that's a hard one because you take aspects of a whole bunch of people, whether attributes of leadership, intellect, how people work within their own electorate. So I wouldn't say there's any one individual who I aspire to be or who I wish I was like that. I mean, there's I take little bits from a lot of different areas, but I'm always trying to improve myself, always trying to be the best representative I can be. And some of the best advice I get are from citizens of Wide Bay who'll tell me something and
what are they telling you?
Keep doing what you're doing. Don't go down there and just toe the line for the sake of towing the line. They like the fact that I stand up.
Were they worried about that you were going to do that when you first started?
I think there's always there's always a period of consideration where people don't go into politics saying, well, at their pre-selection speech, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down there, I'm going to tell you all these positive things that I'm going to change, and then when I'm going down there, I'm actually not going to do anything, or I'm going to sit on my bum down there and just try and be as quiet and not upset as many people as possible. People don't say that when they go into politics. They always come out with a grand list of how good they are and what they're going to achieve. But it's up to the people to decide on how you're going. And they will look at you and make an assessment. Is this guy or girl, is this person delivering? Are they living up to those things that they said they would do pre-election or pre-selection? Are they actually standing up? Are they a strong voice for my community? Their decisions and assessments that your constituency has to make, I'd like to think that I've delivered billions of dollars worth of infrastructure to the area. I've stood up on issues of national significance in my first term. I've been available as best as I can, been available to the constituents who put me there.
Does it surprise you how busy you are?
Look, it's not a surprise, but it's a challenge at times. You do get very busy, but that's part of the job. And if you're not busy, there's something wrong once again.
What is the best part of the job, and the worst part, for that matter?
The best part of the job is a hard one. I think quite often the wins that we have, my staff, I've got incredible staff, and the staff do so much. So much of the workload that comes into my office is taken by staff who know who to ring where in what department to fix something that's wrong. Quite often my staff will come to me and they will have fixed something, and that is there's a huge amount of satisfaction there, because that can, whilst it mightn't seem like a major event to anyone else, somebody's DVA issued or somebody's pension problem that's holding up their pension can be a massive stressor on a senior Australian, massive. And when I either help or one of my staff help, that's great. So it's not always the addressing the General Assembly of the United Nations or cutting the ribbon on a new piece of infrastructure. Sometimes it's the knowledge that you have just had a huge positive influence on an everyday citizen of Wide Bay. That's what I get a great deal of satisfaction from. What's
something about Llew Obrien that most people don't know? Because you're a pretty public figure these days.
Yeah, that's right. I put it all out there. Look, that I'm a keen photographer, that I love photography, and sometimes as part of relaxation and part of de-stressing, I find that photography is a great way of relaxing. Takes you out of your own mind. You know, you're a photographer, you're a cameraman, you know about videography and all of those things. You know, when you've got to frame a shot and you've got to look at everything that's not going on in your head and capture something of value. I love that. I love taking bird photography of bird photographs, and I love taking photographs of my grandkids. So yeah, probably that I'm a bit of a mad keen photographer.
What do you prefer, portrait photography or landscape?
When it's my granddaughter in front of me, it's all portraits, and but like I said, I don't mind landscape photography, but I like bird photography, especially if you've got a decent lens. I've got a 1 to 400 mil micro 4/3 lens, so for your full frame equivalent, it's like an 800 mil lens.
That's a biggie.
Yeah, that's a biggie, and you can take some pretty amazing photographs of birds from some distance, and I love doing that. It's a bit like fishing. You know, you never know. You'll take a whole heap of photos, hoping that you've got a few, and then you'll have a look, and you might have an absolute cracker there. I really enjoy that.
It's funny. I know the moment I hit the button that I've got a good shot.
Yeah,
I might take 20.
Yeah,
but I know when I've hit the magic button. What's your favourite photo that you've taken?
My favourite photos are always those with my granddaughter.
You light up. You're a very hands-on dad.
Yeah.
How are you as a granddad?
I'm the fun guy. My granddaughter comes to me whenever she drops around or we're looking after her, and I am Mr. Entertainment. So it's look, I just love being a granddad, and it's something that filters into. It's me. It's Llew Obrien. It's a big part of my life.
It's a great leveller to have people that rely on you so implicitly.
Yeah. Well, before grandkids, you have kids, and that's a huge responsibility, and something that I cherish greatly, and something that I, as a cop, a lot of police officers see people that don't cherish that, and kids in distress, and that really great, is hard to come to terms with, and you think about people that are in positions where they can't have kids and want them, and then all of a sudden you see these people that have kids and don't do the right thing, and you think how unfair that is sometimes. But I understand how precious it is, and it's extremely, family is everything.
What have you still got to achieve in Parliament? What's the biggie that you really want to get across the line? You've done banking, you've done some pretty large infrastructure with roads. What do you still want to do?
I think there's so at a local level, we've got to keep this 4 lanes going north. I'm not going to stop. I may not win, but I will do my best, and I'm not going to stop trying on this Tyro bypass until we've got 4 lanes. It's just something that is fundamentally obvious and needs to happen. So that's one of the big infrastructure projects that I'm focused on. We've got areas of our economy, local Wide Bay economy, that have been hit hard through COVID, like Noosa. The tourism industry was one of the first to be turned off and is still struggling. There are aspects of, some of it is going quite well, but there are aspects of tourism in places like Noosa that need help, and I'm focused in on there with other representatives to try and help that. help there. The list goes on and on and on in terms of what you need to deliver. There's very high youth unemployment rates in Wide Bay, and I'm not going to rest until we've got more jobs, more industry. And there needs to be an understanding of what's appropriate for where when you're fighting for these things. I mean, one of the other aspects aside from safety for this for this Tyro bypass is if you build a better road, if you build a bigger piece of infrastructure, you attract more growth and better growth in that area. There's talk of solar industrial parks and everything around Tyro. That area will be so much more attractive to people looking to invest if there's that 9 kilometre 4-lane section as opposed to a bottleneck 2-lane. So whilst you look at things like that and you think, okay, that's a better road, it's going to get the spin-off or the outcomes when getting those good pieces of infrastructure are broader than that. They attract more and better investment into the area, and that'll feed into lowering that high youth unemployment rate overall. So there are just so many things to keep fighting for.
What about high-speed rail from Bundaberg to Brisbane to supplement the already congested Bruce Highway?
Yeah, look, high-speed rail is obviously a topic that comes up regularly. It's something that a lot of people like the idea of. High-speed rail is ultimately the responsibility, as rail is, of the state government. But one of the things you need to really consider when it comes to high-speed rail is what is high-speed rail? Is a train that stops at every stop going to be high-speed rail? And then you've got to look at the economics of a train that picks up X amount of passengers in Bundaberg, X amount of passengers in Maryborough, X amount of passengers in Gympie that travels at 300 kilometres an hour. You've got to look at the economics of that, and is that a good use of taxpayers' money if it doesn't stack up? So I'm not saying it doesn't stack up, but you certainly have to look at all of these things before you start absolutely championing a project like that. And because at the end of the day, the government doesn't have any money. We just spend your money. That's what we do, taxpayers and revenues that come in. That's not... Scott Morrison doesn't have that. That's not Scott Morrison's money. It's not Josh Frydenberg's money. It's the taxpayers of Australians and Australian citizens. It's their money. So we've got to be very, very diligent with how we handle it.
How would you like to be remembered then?
I'd like to be remembered I'd just as a bloke that had a go, maybe did things. I don't want to be remembered as somebody who did things unconventionally. I think it's a bit of an indictment on Australian politics that I'm seen to be unconventional because I'm just doing things the way that they should be done, I think, in terms of advocacy. But had a go. Somebody who had a go, did his absolute best and had more wins than he had losses.
Well, we hope you keep winning the good fight. Llew Obrien, thanks for joining us on Over the Bonnet.
Thanks, Mark. It's a great pleasure, mate.